It started with a smile. Not mine. His. Or hers. Or theirs. Honestly, I don't know what River identifies as this week. All I remember is the smile. Thin, glassy, detached. The kind of expression you'd expect from a concierge offering you a warm towel right before shoving you into an open elevator shaft. My name is Michael Lang. I'm 52 years old. Until this morning, I served as Executive Vice President of Strategic Revenue Architecture for Virion Technologies. Long title, longer responsibility. 15 years ago, I wrote the playbook that saved this company's life. Before I showed up, they were burning through Series B like drunk trust funders at Coachella. After I rebuilt their revenue ops, we posted profit 8 straight quarters. Real profit, not VC fairy dust. I didn't just grow the business, I stabilized it, structured it, taught it how to survive. Then came the new era. I walked into the office at 6:42 a.m., 38 minutes earlier than anyone else on this floor, as always. The glass doors to the 34th level hissed open, and I inhaled the scent of fresh carpet cleaner and burnt espresso. It was a Monday. Sky overcast. Forecast said rain by noon. I passed the reception desk, nodded to Melissa, who gave me a look that said she already knew. Not pity. Something closer to sympathy dressed as confusion. I made my way to the conference room, where I'd been summoned by River, the newly appointed interim CEO, courtesy of a nepotistic sleight of hand. The founder's only child, 26 years old, no relevant experience. Androgynous haircut, chunky rings, loose silk shirt, like they were hosting a TED Talk on sustainable art therapy. River didn't stand when I entered, just tapped at their phone like they were sending an apology tweet to the ozone layer. "Michael," they said, drawing out the vowels. "Thanks for coming in early. I know mornings can be triggering for some people, but I appreciate your punctuality." I didn't sit. I never do in meetings like this. Makes it easier to leave on your own terms. River's assistant, a soft-voiced intern named Jules, handed over a pale blue envelope. No logo. Just my name in looping cursive. "I'll get to the point," River said, tapping their temple like they were downloading the words from the cloud. "We've had some, concerns about your leadership style, your energy. It's been described as..." They paused to check the screen. "Intimidating, hyper-analytical, emotionally inflexible," which has, unfortunately, created a challenging environment for our newer team members. I kept my face neutral. I've had snipers aim at me with more conviction than this kid had, trying to terminate my employment. River kept going. "We're working hard to cultivate a safe, neurodivergent affirming workplace, a healing space, and sometimes excellence can come at the cost of empathy." I finally spoke. "You're firing me because I work too hard?" River smiled, that same empty smile. "Your work ethic is creating a toxic atmosphere." Then, while still holding eye contact, they raised their phone and snapped a selfie. I could see myself in the background, jaw clenched, eyes unreadable. "For the gram," they muttered, before adding, "Your severance is outlined in that envelope. 2 months' salary, counseling services if you'd like, and a signed letter of recommendation, should you seek employment elsewhere." I took the envelope, tucked it into my briefcase, smiled. "Of course, thank you." And then I turned and walked out, not looking back. Melissa didn't say anything as I passed. Neither did the junior associates in the open floor pods, those who'd taken my frameworks, my training, my intellectual capital, and massaged it into PowerPoints that would now be presented under someone else's name. The elevator was empty. I stepped in, hit the lobby button, and let my breath out slowly. Once outside, I walked 3 blocks to the parking garage. 2nd level. My truck was parked in the corner, nose pointed toward the exit like it already knew. I sat behind the wheel for a moment, watching the city stretch awake. Then I opened the envelope. Too light. Inside, termination letter, signed and dated. A severance check for exactly 2 months' salary. No stock option paperwork. No rollover instructions for my executive share pool. Nothing about my 401k match or the equity vesting clause I negotiated during the M&A deal 6 years ago. I called legal. Voicemail. I tried HR. Disconnected. I opened my tablet. Access revoked. Internal server blocked. All my credentials burned. I smiled again. This time it wasn't for River or the company. It was for me. They thought I built a model. They didn't realize I built the system. Revenue wasn't the only thing I engineered. I designed contingencies, off-grid backups, fail-safes disguised as friction points. Virion Technologies didn't survive the 2008 crash because it got lucky. It survived because I made sure it couldn't fail. But that kind of structure, the kind that bends but doesn't break, has a cost. And now they'd cut the only person who understood how the gears turn. Let them. The apartment was dark, except for the soft blue glow of the monitors lining my desk. 3 of them, curved together like the inside of a cockpit. My hands moved by muscle memory, plugging in drives, decrypting folders, opening ghost partitions I hadn't touched in over a decade. The coffee beside me had gone cold an hour ago. I didn't reheat it. I needed the bitterness. The first folder opened with a whisper of spinning disk. Inside, full versions of the original revenue modeling architecture I built for Virion Technologies. Not just the projections. Anyone can make a pretty graph. These were the bones underneath. Load balancing nodes for revenue channels, fraud exposure models, seasonal index weightings with real-time recalibration protocols. They thought they'd locked me out. Cute. I never left. Each backup was stored locally, isolated from the cloud, immune to subpoena, and wrapped in a triple encryption cipher that used my old deployment call signs as keys. Good luck brute forcing that with a MacBook and a TikTok mindset. I dragged the latest simulation package into the sandbox and hit execute. The screen flickered, then rendered a line graph, sharp incline, then a jagged, sickening drop. Exactly 53 days. That's how long they had until the entire system began collapsing under its own incompetence. Without my back-end logic patching holes in the quarterly inputs, their predictive model was basically a Ouija board held by interns. Over-forecasting, under-delivering, inflation stressors, unhedged, market signals, misread. A single black swan event, say a supplier delay or unexpected churn, and they'd be in the red, fast. I leaned back, cracked my neck, and let the silence settle in. This wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about the math, about the way reality bends just enough to punish arrogance. I opened another window, an internal feed I still had backdoor access to. An old assistant, Rachel, had quietly slipped me credentials last year when River first started consulting for the company. She knew what was coming before anyone else. Called me a month ago, whispering into the phone like we were trading secrets behind enemy lines. They don't know what they're doing, she'd said. They're rewriting job titles to include astrological sensitivity. I'm serious. Tonight, she'd sent me an audio file. Said she pulled it from the all-hands meeting that afternoon. River's voice filled my speakers. Capitalism, as it currently exists, is a colonial relic, they said, slow and breathy, like they were delivering a sermon from a hemp pulpit. Here at Virion, we're not just building technology. We're dismantling trauma. I blinked. The quarterly OKRs, River continued, aren't just numbers. They're emotional milestones. They reflect our healing journey as a collective. Someone clapped. Then a few more. Within seconds, the room was full of applause. I could practically hear the slack jaws and wide eyes, each one terrified to be the first to stop clapping. I scrubbed forward. The rest was more of the same. Announcements about converting corner offices into reflective rest pods, rebranding sales as intuitive influence, and a pilot program offering Reiki sessions during onboarding. I didn't laugh. I didn't even shake my head. I just watched the simulation finish running in the background. Revenue down 38%, churn up 19%, client satisfaction cratered. It was already happening. I pulled up a terminal window and accessed one of my private diagnostic scripts, an external watcher that had been silently tracking system integrity through latency tells and packet timing, like a seismic monitor for data tremors. Even without access to the mainframe, I could see the irregularities stacking up. Incomplete entries, drift-in forecast baselines, HR inflating headcount ratios to justify diversity grant eligibility. It was all bleeding out, quietly, under the surface. They didn't even realize it yet. 15 years. That's how long I gave them. Long enough to turn a sinkhole of a company into a machine that practically ran itself. Until they decided machines were problematic. I sipped my cold coffee, grimaced. There's a funny thing that happens when people get too comfortable with success. They start believing it's natural, that it'll keep happening because they're special. They forget the nights someone else stayed awake, running simulations until their vision blurred. They forget how hard it is to build something that doesn't die in its sleep. They think leadership is language, that if you say the right words, safe, inclusive, mindful, it replaces competence. They don't know yet, but the ground under them has already cracked. It was raining, not the cinematic kind, just enough to soak your collar and make the sidewalk glisten like a threat. I sat in the corner booth of a downtown coffee shop that hadn't changed since the recession. Vinyl seats, chipped ceramic mugs, a jukebox with more rust than volume. My laptop was open in front of me. 2 phones beside it. 1 burner, 1 legacy. The burner was already wiped. The legacy one buzzed once and went quiet. That was the signal. I glanced up as the door creaked open. Jared Feldman stepped in first, board member since 2009, wore expensive suits like they were bathrobes. He spotted me, nodded once, and sat down without a word. 30 seconds later, Claire Vaughn followed. Gray hair, no-nonsense trench coat, 3-time CEO turned investor, and the sharpest operator I've ever met in a boardroom. She didn't nod, just sat. Between us on the table sat a USB drive. Matte black, no logo, no markings. Inside it, a 40-page audit compiled from shadows. All of it anonymized, all of it real. I had spent the last week collecting whistleblower statements, scraping deleted communications, and cross-referencing metadata on internal memos that weren't supposed to exist. The result? A complete breakdown of River's executive behavior. Fabricated KPIs, backdated diversity reports, inflated user engagement stats, and 2 ESG filings signed by someone who hadn't worked at the company in over a year. None of it required my name, just the data. I slid the drive across the table. Claire picked it up with 2 fingers like it was radioactive. This traceable? No, I said. It's surgical. Jared looked at me. You want us to leak this? I shook my head. I want you to do your job. Protect the company. They didn't speak for a while, just sat, letting the implication take root. River wasn't a phase anymore. River was a liability. We'll review it tonight, Claire said finally. But if it checks out, it checks out, I said. She met my eyes, not hostile, just thorough. Then expect a call. They left. No handshakes, no goodbyes. Just the soft sound of Claire's heels and Jared's umbrella clicking back into place. I packed up my things. The burner went into a trash compactor behind the building. The legacy phone into a waterproof bag taped to the underside of a storm drain, covered 2 blocks away. I didn't need them anymore. They'd served their purpose. The next step wasn't technical. It was theatrical. I drove to the old diner off 10th and Franklin, the one with the best steak and eggs east of the financial district. It was nearly empty, except for a couple of off-duty cops nursing coffee and a waitress who looked like she'd worked here since the Clinton years. I ordered, sat by the window, and pulled out my tablet. No logins, just public feeds. River had just posted another video. I watched them speak into the camera like it was a mirror. Today's leadership tip, they began, breathy and composed, is about executive mindfulness. We can't disrupt the future unless we unlearn the past. Make space for your inner child. Let go of capitalism's toxic hold on your value system. They closed their eyes, held up a crystal, whispered something in Sanskrit I'm certain they couldn't translate. The comments were filled with fire emojis and buzzwords. I recognized half the names from the HR department. I cut the feed and focused on my food. My phone buzzed. A message flashed across the lock screen. Private shareholder portal access. New file uploaded. Source: anonymous contributor. File name: internal audit, executive malfeasance v3. I'd uploaded it through a loophole I wrote into the architecture 12 years ago, meant for emergency disclosures in the event of internal sabotage. No one even knew the function existed, buried in plain sight, disguised as a formatting tool for report annotations. I had designed it back when the founders still ran things like a mission, not a mood board. Now the file was live, indexed, immutable. Every shareholder with Class A access would see it by morning. Not long after, a second notification came in. Emergency board session, requested, 11:59 p.m. tonight. There it was. The panic. I finished the eggs, sipped the last of the diner coffee. It tasted like cardboard and resolve. Outside, the rain had slowed to a mist. The world still spun. Nobody screamed. That's the thing about well-laid contagions. They don't need volume. They just need time. River was still filming by the time I stood to leave. Their most recent post ended with a quote. "You are not your output. You are your openness." I smiled. Quiet. Cold. The thing about safe spaces, you still need walls, and they forgot I designed the foundation. The storm rolled in just after 9. Heavy drops, sharp wind, sky torn open in pulses. It felt like timing, not weather. I parked in the underground garage, level P3, where the light flickered just enough to feel like foreshadowing. My shoes echoed on the concrete as I made my way to the elevator, tie knotted, coat dry, heart slow. The building had always looked better in the dark. No post-it murals, no wellness posters, no slogans about impact over income. Just glass and steel. The 34th floor was dead quiet when the doors opened. I stepped into the main corridor and made my way to the West Side Executive Boardroom. The original one. No beanbags, no acoustic guitars, no juice bars. Just leather chairs, walnut table, a projector no one dared replace, and the scent of expensive silence. They were already seated when I entered. Claire sat dead center, Jared to her left. A few of the other legacy board members flanked them, brows creased, hands folded. River sat near the end of the table, legs crossed at the knee, one shoe a high-top sneaker, the other a Chelsea boot. Mismatched, on purpose. A kind of rebellion that made sense only in curated Instagram captions. They were vaping. Lavender, I think. The scent lingered like a bad idea. I didn't speak, just took the empty chair they'd left at the head of the table, across from River. No introductions, no opening statement. Claire clicked a button, and the overhead lights dimmed slightly. "Mr. Lang," she said, voice like dry ice. "We'd like you to walk us through the contents of the audit you submitted anonymously." "I didn't submit anything anonymously," I replied calmly. "I just didn't sign it." A few chuckles from the older directors. River rolled their eyes and exhaled a cloud of scented fog. Jared interjected. We've corroborated some of the report already. Timeline checks out, metadata's clean. We need you to confirm its origin. It came from inside, I said. Direct access, whistleblower testimony, server logs, chat records, none of it edited, none of it inflated. Claire gestured for me to continue. I pulled a flash drive from my inner jacket pocket and placed it on the table. Matte silver, no markings. This version includes everything: timestamps, internal emails, expense routing anomalies, a crypto wallet tied to a shell foundation, registered in Liechtenstein. River laughed. This is a witch hunt. I looked at them. You'd need to be a witch to understand the math. Claire nodded toward the CFO, a lean man with the permanent frown of someone who hates adjectives in financial reports. He opened a laptop and clicked a few keys. A projection lit up behind us. An expense ledger, line item highlighted in red. The amount in question is $2.3 million, he said, moved through a discretionary marketing fund into a third-party consultancy named Heel Chain. I tilted my head. Catchy. He continued. Heel Chain appears to be a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, operating under the premise of digital wellness therapy. No board, no product, no regulatory filings. Claire looked at River. Would you care to explain the nature of this partnership? River shrugged. It's experimental. Cutting-edge engagement tools. Our Gen Z retention numbers have spiked since implementation. We're trying to stay relevant. By funneling investor money into crypto communes? I asked. I have approval, River snapped. No, I said. You had access. They went silent for a beat, then smiled again, plastic and rehearsed. You're just bitter. You built a system for a world that's dying. We're trying to imagine something better. Imagining doesn't pay salaries, I said. Imagining doesn't keep the lights on. Jared spoke next. We've reviewed the communications, texts, Slack threads, emails sent from your corporate alias. You authorized creative accounting to bolster our ESG scoring during the last funding round. River looked around. That's standard. Everyone pads the metrics. It's part of the game. No, Claire said, ice cold. You played the game. You forgot the rules. The room fell still. Outside, thunder cracked like a verdict. I leaned forward, voice even. You wanted to build a company where no one felt unsafe. You just forgot to keep the wolves out. River stood suddenly, vape trembling in hand. This is a joke. You're just afraid of change, afraid of evolution. No, I said. I'm afraid of amateurs. Claire closed her laptop. The board has seen enough. There was no vote. Not allowed. Just eye contact. Nods. Consensus without ceremony. Jared looked at River. You're being placed on sabbatical, effective immediately, pending a full investigation. River blinked. You mean I'm fired? Claire shook her head. No. Fired implies consequence. This is exile. Security was already waiting by the elevator. I didn't watch them leave. I just stared at the USB on the table and thought about how fragile systems are, not because of pressure, but because of carelessness, and how sometimes the best way to keep something standing is to burn the rot before it spreads. The roof was wet, but the rain had quieted to a mist, just enough to hang in the air and coat the concrete with a sheen that caught the first gold of sunrise. I stood near the ledge, one hand in my coat pocket, the other holding a black ceramic mug I'd stolen from the break room years ago. No logo, no slogan, just a solid cup that held heat the way I liked it. Below me, the city was still mostly asleep, just a few lights blinking on, a few buses grinding through the arteries. The skyline hadn't changed much since I started at Virion, but the company inside the glass tower behind me had, stripped down, redrawn, painted over with slogans and mission statements about healing, and intention and collective transformation. No offer had come to return, no phone call, no email, not even a polite form letter to acknowledge what had happened. Good. That wasn't why I was here. The final decision on River had been handed off to legal and PR. That's how it always ends, with documents and handshakes and silent agreements about who gets to say what. River was already being rebranded online as a creative visionary caught in a system too slow to evolve. I'd seen the headline previews. Damage control dressed as legacy building. They'd land on a speaking tour or a podcast circuit within the month. That was inevitable. I never hated River. Not really. Hate's a waste of oxygen. What I hated was what they represented. The theater of competence. The illusion that saying the right things at the right decibel with the right hashtags could replace the brutal precision of actual work, of building things, of owning the outcomes. River didn't break the company alone. They just happened to be the most visible avatar of an infection that had been spreading quietly for years. I took a sip of coffee, still warm, still bitter. Inside my coat was a small tablet, encrypted, stripped down, no camera, no apps, just a login portal I hadn't used in 3 months. I tapped it awake. My access credentials blinked on, still active. That surprised me. Someone had forgotten to close the door behind them, or maybe no one even knew which door to close. I'd buried this access point so deep in the infrastructure, it probably looked like a formatting script. I tapped once. Logged in. The dashboard unfolded. My old forecasting architecture was still running, barely. The logic had frayed, variables had drifted, dozens of critical alerts were muted. I watched the numbers scroll past. A slow bleed, small at first, but compounding. I could have let it collapse. Would have been poetic. The final warning that no one wanted to listen to. But I didn't. I pulled up the repair protocol. A patch I wrote for scenarios exactly like this, back when I still believed in the idea of prevention. I keyed in the sequence, watched it compile, then deployed it. 12 seconds later, the errors vanished. Baselines stabilized. Forecasting margin corrected. Future bleed neutralized. I added no signature, no watermark, no breadcrumbs. No one would know it came from me. I closed the tablet, slipped it back inside my coat, took another sip. Somewhere below, the system would begin humming again. Numbers would align, projections would regain accuracy, investors would smile, employees would breathe easier. The board would chalk it up to resilience. They'd say the crisis resolved itself, that the storm passed, that the company survived. No one would ask why. That's how you know you did it right. I finished the coffee and set the mug on the ledge. A part of me wanted to drop it, watch it fall, shatter, leave a mark. But I didn't. I left it there, still warm, still useful. Let someone else decide what to do with it. The sun finally broke clean over the horizon, sharp and gold. It painted the clouds in strokes of brass and fire. I didn't take a photo. I didn't update my status. I just stood there a moment longer, breathing it in. Then I turned and walked back toward the stairwell. No headlines would follow me, no commendation, no thank you for your service. And I liked it that way, because when systems work, no one notices the architect. They just enjoy the stability and forget the man who designed it.